All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. This is Dillard with Teen Talk Live. Once again, on Teen Talk Live, what we do is we share skills and strategies that transform the minds and lives of teens and those who love them. And today we're going to jump right in. I have the privilege of having one of my colleagues here with us. And today, let me just make sure that minds and lives of teens and those who I am muting this so it doesn't cause a conflict. So today I'm so delighted to have one of my colleagues here with us. I have Miss Jaynay.
Hi.
Jaynay Johnson. She is a teen therapist and she is also an author. And she's going to tell you more about herself. Jaynay, welcome. I'm so glad you're able to join us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about teenagers, of course.
I was watching you all weekend and my goodness, you were engaged in so many activities with teens. Tell us some of the things that you did this weekend.
Oh, yes. So actually this weekend with my good friend and colleague, Marlene Francois Madden, we launched our very first Brunch and Bond tour for teenagers, for teen girls. And so we pretty much introduced, I would say this weekend, about 60 girls to brunch. And it was just such an amazing experience to have all of those girls. We started in New Jersey, and then we also went to Brooklyn on Sunday. So we had New Jersey Saturday, Brooklyn Sunday, and it was just such an amazing experience. And to hear the feedback, the girls from Brooklyn, they want a whole, they want a weekend, they want a retreat out of us. But it was just such an uplifting and motivating experience to even read on like one of the surveys. The girl said that she learned she could be in a room, full of girls and there not be drama. Like that just warmed my heart so much because I think they don't understand that. And, to teach them that now instead of waiting until they're adults and go to empowerment events to feel that means the world. And that was also part of my purpose and Marlene's too. Like, hey, we get along as women, we connect as women, we collaborate. We need to teach our young girls that this is possible, even when they're 13, 14, and 15. So it was amazing. And I'm excited to keep going. So we have Philly in April, Baltimore in May 19th, and DC May 20th, and Philly is April 21st. So we're going to keep going and keep on hoping to impact more teen girls. Yeah, so it was a busy weekend.
Oh, amazing. You all are seriously taking the East Coast by storm. I am so excited.
Thank you.
That is exciting. So let's jump right into our topic. Oh my goodness. So tonight we are talking about Daja's trauma, right? So anybody who watches This Is Us and watch Daja on This Is Us, this is what we're talking about tonight. So stay tuned, gear up. Let me acknowledge our guests who are popping on. I'm so excited to have Charlotte here. Shardine, all the way from Jamaica, is joining us. Sybil, I'm here. No, Erica, welcome. Sister Sandy, welcome. Let me acknowledge our guests. I'm so glad you're here. Tisha and Jenny is here, and my cousin is here from Canada, and Illy is here. Welcome. And Patrice, I'm so glad you're here. Oh my goodness. So I've just been thinking about This Is Us, and a lot of us watch that show. If you watch This Is Us, drop I watch This Is Us in the comment, okay? So hey Renata, I'm glad you're here. So drop This Is Us in the comment. I watch This Is Us. We love that show. Do you like that show, Jaynay?
I love it. I do. And I just live for Beth and Randall's storyline. And I know there are plenty of people out there who agree with me. Like their storyline is just like the whole show, but whatever.
It's so amazing. And
yes,
my husband, he gets tired of, what's the guy's name?
Kevin?
Huh? Not Kevin. Not Kevin. What's the other guy?
Toby.
Nope, not Toby. What's Kevin's brother's name?
Randall.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He gets so tired of Randall. And he's like, oh my gosh, so much drama, but it's so real.
It is real.
So real to me. Hey, or I'm so glad you're here. Patrice, I'm glad you're here, girl. Thanks for joining us. So we're talking about Daja. So help us get caught up for those who haven't. Okay, this is going to be a spoiler if you all haven't watched the episode.
Right.
Where they talked about Daja and they gave some history of her family. Okay, so let's talk about her family. We were able to see some stuff. One episode was just focused on her. And I was so excited that they did that episode because then we got to see the backstory, right? A lot of times, and we talked about this before, a lot of times when we see people exhibiting different behaviors, we always think, what's wrong with them? And not necessarily take the time to say what has happened to them, what happened in their lives that caused them to behave like that. So give us your insight on what you saw when we watched that episode with Daja and her family backstory.
Okay, so when I saw that, I saw Daja as the caring child, because I think when you watch This Is Us and you see her behavior, which is what we do a lot, right? We see teenagers, we see that external part of them, right? And it gives us pause because they're they can be aggressive, they can be verbally disrespectful, they can be doing a lot of things, not following directives. And we're like, oh, pause, I can't with this teenager, they're too grown. And in this episode where they, went back into her life, I saw how caring she was, how responsible Daja was, how much she actually had to take on. But when, that wasn't working, when mom, because the function of her doing that was to make sure things were okay, their life could be stable, mom could get on the right track. So she probably felt, whatever I can do to make this a smoother ride, I'm going to do it because I want this to be a smooth ride. And I think when we look at a lot of teenagers, we think that they enjoy rocking the boat and that they enjoy doing all of that. But depending on their circumstances and where they come from, they're just trying to make it a smooth ride. They're just trying to calm it down and they're just trying to, live a more peaceful life. And I think that it was really amazing to see them show her in that light because I think it gave lots of light into her current life because now she's feeling like a failure. Everything that I've tried to do to make this a healthy relationship between mom and I, to make our home life stable, it didn't work. Not realizing that's not her responsibility. Exactly. But a lot of teenagers will take on that because they love their parents. That's one. They love their parents. So they want their parents healthy. And they want them in their lives. They don't want to have to go to an aunt. They don't want to have to be raised by grandma. They don't want those things. They want their parent. But after lots of, more trauma, those things not working, teenagers will harbor that because they don't have the tools to truly articulate their feelings. And now, the trust is broken with adults. And so what do we do? So that's what I saw. I was happy to see a caring and compassionate Daja because I think that that's within most of our children anyway. I just think things happen and their behaviors have certain functions and we don't stop to take the time to say, what is the function of this behavior? What purpose is it serving for him or her? So, yeah.
That is so true. That is so true. One of the things that I saw so pronounced was I saw a missing, Daja's grandmother was missing out of the picture. So even though her great grandmother was there, right, to take care of her mom and her mother wasn't even in the picture. So then that made me question, what skills does Daja's mother have then?
Right. Right.
Because that attachment is really, really important.
Very important, very, and teaching it. And so even when we look at our, the generations and a lot of the time with Daja's mother being a teen mom, right? She was also in her own developmental stage that doesn't necessarily, give her the tools to say, okay, this is what I need to do to be a mother. And of course I commend, the great grandmother for coming in, but I think what ended up happening was, I can't even remember Daja's mother's name, but she wasn't given the skills and the tools to really understand what attachment was like and how to nurture Daja and how to kind of still be there for her as much as she can, although she's a young parent. And I think that happens a lot. We don't give, teen moms the opportunity to learn how to be nurturing within the scope of their development. Obviously, there are some things they're going to need assistance with, and no one's saying not be supportive or just kind of drop the load on them and not help them, but helping them navigate what attachment is going to look like because they're 16 and with child, or, because they're 17, because they're still trying to go to college, like how to still foster a healthy attachment with their child, although they're still growing in a certain space as well. And I think those conversations can be left out a lot, and there aren't a lot of skills being passed down. So you notice when, she died, it was kind of just like, whoa. It was a complete shock to the system. And I think that happens a lot where we're not taking the time to either look at what we did in one generation and not pass it down because that's not something that should be passed down, or we're guilty about how one thing happened in one generation, and so we overcompensate and over pick up in the next generation.
Exactly, because
yeah.
About Daja's great grandma, right? And I can't think of her name.
Yeah, me neither.
She could have possibly be thinking, okay, whatever happened with her daughter, we don't know. We're just speculating that,
right.
For whatever reason, the daughter isn't in the picture, right? And she could in turn be overcompensating for her absent daughter that she then, did so much for Daja's mom, or picked up the slack so much and not taught her as a teen mom the skills that she needed. And therefore she wasn't able to function at all.
Absolutely. And I think it happens a lot because, I do it in my own life in certain areas too. It's like, oh, I'm good at this. Let me just do it. Let me just make it happen, or, and we mean well. I think that's the point I was trying to get. Like, even when I do things like that, like it comes from a good place. And I know that even for that great, like it came from a good place. Like, oh, I would be here to support. But we do have to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, should I be feeding this person or teaching them how to, catch the fish, right? What makes the most sense, even just in this moment, right? Or with this particular situation. But I know she meant well, and I know a lot of people mean well. It's just we have to look. That would have been helpful for Daja's mom as well, and ultimately helpful for Daja.
Right. And I get what you're saying. It is so true. As a grandmother myself, if my grandkids were around me, I would be doing the same thing, right? I've been through this before. I can do this. And you all go on and do what you need to do. I'll take care of
right
grandkids. And so and by us being so nurturing and just the nature of us being women, we do that and not necessarily think about how the harm that we could potentially be causing.
Or just, I think one thing I was saying to a friend is once we noticed that there was something we could have done differently or better, I feel like just as humans, we always want the opportunity to like make it right, it has to be perfect, make it right? So maybe even in that great grandmother's sense, she realized there was a missing piece or something that she didn't think to do at the time. And so with the new opportunity, I can do it, I can right this wrong. And I think sometimes we have to just give ourselves the space to say, I didn't do it right. That's okay. And this new opportunity necessarily isn't the opportunity for me to try to, turn the corner. Because I think it then, it allows us to not just make mistakes and be human and not get it right all of the time, which causes more pressure, more stress, more frustration. I think that's another part of it. Like once we learn, the right thing to do, I think it's good moving forward in our own life. But I think sometimes I wonder, like, are we seeking out these opportunities to try to make it right? And is that not allowing us to be okay with mistakes or our flaws or the fact that we just didn't know better, so we didn't do better,
Correct. Just hold that thought for a minute.
Okay.
I want to come back and talk about making it right and how
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we miss the boat with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let me invite our guests to come on in. Deandra, I'm so glad you're here. Hey, Don. Hey, Nicole, I'm glad you joined us. And Sabra, glad you're here. Javante, you're here this week with us. Ladies, welcome. So if you guys are just joining, I'm talking with teen therapist and author Jaynay Johnson, and we're talking about Daja's trauma. And if you all watch This Is Us, that's the Daja we're talking about. And we're just kind of unpacking her trauma and talking about some generational stuff that we picked up during that. So just say hello, let me know that you're here. And if you have questions about Daja and her trauma, just drop them in the comment box and do me a favor and share this out also, so other people can have the privilege of being a part of this conversation. So when I'm gonna go back to what you were saying, Jaynay, about we're trying to do it right. And I know that a lot of times we'll say to ourselves, I'll never do this to my kids that my parents might have done to me, and in effort of doing things right or doing things differently, doing it better. And I was thinking about that as I watched the show, because in this upcoming anthology that I authored a chapter in, this is some of the things that I was talking about. How then do we intentionally correct some of the things to stop those generational cycles? Because saying that we're not going to do it alone isn't enough. Mm-hmm. And then what we end up doing is we find ourselves down the road, because we didn't take intentional steps, we find ourselves repeating the same patterns over and over and over. And that is what we're seeing in generations as we looked at Daja's trauma. What do you say about that?
So how to be intentional about it is the first step, right? Is admitting that there's something that you need to be intentional about changing. And I think that is so loaded. And the reason why that's the hardest step is because if you admit that, I think that there can be a lot of guilt and shame around it. I think people can say to themselves like, oh, well, my mom still did the best that she could, or my dad did the best that she could. And they think that they're putting their parents down, or whomever cared for them down, or their circumstances down, or they're complaining, or insert, whatever thought process or word you want. And I think people think that about just being honest about what their life struggle was and what wasn't healthy. Lots of people say all the time, even about spankings, right? Like, I got beat, I'm fine. And I'm like, I guess we could, discuss what fine is, but just because it happened to you and you may not, have been okay, that doesn't mean that the concept of it is a good concept. And it doesn't mean that some people aren't abusing that discipline style and that it is harmful to other children in the world. So one is being super intentional and admitting that there is something that happens in your family that has to stop. Because if you actually stopped and was honest with yourself, you could see the negative ramifications and the emotional. Now that's another thing. Right. I think we don't stop to take stock of emotional damage and emotional trauma and emotional abuse. Right. I think when we're looking at changing things, we're only looking at it from a perspective of, well, we still had a house and we still had this, we still had that, but we're not stopping to say, what was it like in those moments when you didn't see your mom for 12, 14, 15 hours, right? Or you had to figure out your homework by, we don't have those deeper conversations, right? We look at the hierarchy of needs, and that's good that we understand, like, our parents did our best to meet our need, like our needs, our survival needs, but we still have to take it a step further to look at the emotion, because what happens, like you said, if we don't, we have that same mentality. And as entrepreneurs and millennials, I think we're doing, well, as I'm an entrepreneur and a millennial, and I think a lot of what we do is like, oh, we want to work different schedules to have time, but we are also up against this battle of you always have to be busy to make it seem like you're doing something. And that's just the culture, even with social media. And it's just like, are we going to inadvertently kind of do the same thing? Because although we're not working for an employer, are we about to work ourselves into the ground? Because, you know, there's a teen no sleep and all of these different narratives. And so really stopping to look at the emotional ramifications of it and say, okay, this isn't okay. When it happened, it was the best that my parent could do. And that's something I try to always say, even in family therapy. Hey, mom, dad, you did the best that you could do with the information you had at that given time.
Right.
And I think if we just stop and really just say that to ourselves about our parents, we won't feel guilty for wanting to move forward, because you understand your mom did the best she could do. Your dad did the best they could do at the time with the information, with the knowledge that they had. You have different knowledge, so you need to use it differently. And so that would be for me the first step.
I think that's really, really good. I think that's really good, Jaynay. And I think too, as parents, when we realize that, it behooves us to also stop and say, you know what, I didn't do, or I made some mistakes, or this is what I could have done differently, so that our children don't have to, you know, bear our burden. And like we talk about in contextual theory, they don't have to try to balance our ledgers. According to that theory, we give what was given to us, and we take away from the next generation what was taken away from us.
Happens a lot.
And so we see the cycle of what we would call generational curse. And a lot of times people think, well, that's just a curse that my family has, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's our fate. And that's not true.
Right.
We can stop it. We can, and you said it so perfectly. First, you have to really admit it without the guilt and the shame.
Yeah. And that's hard to do. And I know that we talk about generational curses and, you know, balance and ledgers. And another thing in contextual therapy is a lot of destructive entitlement. You know, and we don't stop to think about that, because we look at our families and our youth and, you know, our teenagers, especially because their bodies start to change to look like adults. I was supposed to post this on my page today and totally didn't, because I've been like so sleepy and tired. But
here first.
Right. You guys heard it here first. You know, when we look at a teenager's body, they look like an adult. And so adults start to treat teenagers like they're their peers. And we can't have that. They're still children. They still need guidance. And so it's almost like the mind is playing tricks on adults, because it's like, you look grown, so you should be able to have more responsibility. And it's like, sure, but what is that? What is that limit? And we never have that conversation around what is still considered an appropriate teen responsibility and what is an adult responsibility. But I think a lot of times in our family, once that, you know, body develops and, you know, they start to look like that, it kind of becomes very blurry in terms of what you're supposed to invest in the home and how you're supposed to be an active participant in the home and provide. And it's such an interesting conundrum, because even when you look at the word teenager, it wasn't seen in print until 1941, because there was no such thing. You went from child to adult, right, at 13. And so it's still a fairly new concept if you really think about the time. And it's still one of the most researched areas, but it needs so much more research.
Right.
And so, I say all that to say, even when looking at theories and looking at how people are trying to deal with them in their families, it's a tough space for people to kind of navigate and be in. And there is a lot of destructive entitlement, because it's like, hey, I'm doing all of this for you. You owe me. And it's like, no, like they can't necessarily owe you, because the onus is on the parent for bringing them once you made this choice to bring them into the world.
Right.
There was already a contract written in the skies, right? That you were to be the person to care for them. And this is what contextual therapy says, you care for them so much that when it's their turn to parent, they give their child the same love, attention, and affection that you gave them, because that's how it's actually supposed to be passed down, because a child can never repay you for food. They can never love you the way that you want to receive love. And I think that also gets misconstrued when we say things like, oh, they don't appreciate me, they're ungrateful. I think the lens in which most parents are using it for teenagers is different than they think. I think they're thinking of it in a more romantic way versus a parental way. And I don't even know the best way to, sift it and separate it. I don't know if it's talked about enough.
Right.
And so, yeah.
I think that's really key, because as parents too, as you watch your teenager develop, one of the things that happens also is that you see images of yourself. And you see your desires, and you put that on them. And that makes it a very difficult space for those teenagers to be.
Oh, that's a whole nother conversation. But to just drop in with that, I think one thing I tell my parents a lot, even in some sessions, is that you want to make sure what you're trying to give your teenager is what they actually need.
Right.
And not what you would have needed growing up.
Right.
Because your child could be 100% different. And most of the time, that's when we see the conflict, right? Because the child is different and the parent is trying to give them something and they're like, I don't want this. Like, this isn't how, this isn't what I need. And the parent is just kind of like, well, you have it better because my mom and da-da-da-da. And it's like,
exactly. And
okay.
I had to walk 5 miles to school, and you should, and they have no clue. They're like, I'm just trying to be a teenager.
Yes, yeah. And I think, and so even to pull it back to This Is Us, that moment when it broke my heart when they went back to the house and Daja was like laughing and playing with the kids, and her mom said, I've never seen her like this. And she said, I've never seen her be a kid. I think that really hit home, because again, like I was just saying, with this idea of a teenager looking like an adult, or they function like an adult because they see this world and they're like, oh wait, I gotta make sure things stay together. That hit me, because I'm like, wow, there are probably so many youth who may struggle with that, and they don't have the opportunity to just be a kid, right? And just be a kid, just exist, be in a space where they can make mistakes and we guide them, because that's what we're supposed to do. But, we kind of treat it as if you're not supposed to make a mistake. And again, I think it's the mind playing tricks on us based on the development of them and what they look like physically, and not, because we can't see the brain, so we can't see how that's still developing. But we see their body, and we hear them talk, and we're like, oh, you think you're grown? So,
right.
Yeah.
And we can clearly see what was taken away from Daja's mom. She in turn took that away from Daja.
Thought it was normal, right? Exactly. So, even in that, she probably didn't even know, she didn't know what was being taken. She didn't know that. I don't even think she knew she was taking anything away from her, because it wasn't even something that she experienced to begin with herself. Right. So it's tricky. And that happens to all of us. There are things in my family that we do. And I'm like, I go to other people's houses, I'm like, oh, people do that, and it's like, oh, okay. And it's like a different feeling and a different vibe. But I don't think mom even knew what was being taken away from Daja, because again, we don't even know her story to say, hey, this is what was taken away from her. And this is why I advocate for things like my brunches and mentoring programs, because it's just so important to get girls into different spaces. Because even if their home life is one way, if they can go to different spaces and see that there's just different ways of doing things, they can make more informed decisions about that next generation. And that's why I think we see so many teens protesting, and they're like, that is not fair, It's like bunch of little feminists and activists out here, and it's exciting to see because they're so in touch with social justice, and I love it. I really do love it, and I think that they're going to completely shift the way that we are in this world, and it's time.
I think So I mean, I totally agree. I'm just gonna pause to welcome Jamina. Hey, Farah, glad you all are here. We're talking about This Is Us, and we're talking about Daja's trauma and unpacking that a little bit with teen therapist Jaynay Johnson. And I'm so excited that we're having this conversation. And if you are still with us and you have a question, just drop it in the comment section and we will answer it. We have just a few more minutes before we start to wrap up. But Jaynay, I'm so glad you're still here with us. Yes, such an important conversation that we need to have. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us. This is such an important conversation, and so Jaynay, if we're talking to parents who are watching us and they are like, I don't, I see myself doing the same things with my teenagers that I'm trying not to do, or I said I wasn't gonna do. What's like a couple of things we could tell them to do? And I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but what are a couple of things that we could tell them to do to make that U-turn and change the narrative of their family legacy?
Sure. So the first two things that actually just popped to my mind was one, I have this in my workbook. It's like the ultimate guide to parenting your teen, understanding your teen and still love them. But in this workbook, one of the first sheets is parent love. And what I wanted is parents to stop and say things that they loved about themselves and loved about how they parent. And so if any parents are out there watching and you're wondering, I want you to stop and do that. Take some time to think about what do you do as a parent that you actually love, that your teenager probably has given you positive feedback on. And it may look different because teenagers and their positive affirmations, and thanks, it looks a lot different. But take the time to kind of just think about it and just write some positive things about yourself and your parenting. Because I think it's important to recognize the good in us, right? We're not all like, rotten apples. We have some, spots we may need to get rid of, but
right.
I definitely think taking time to write things that you love about yourself, because it kind of opens up your heart in a way to say, I can receive information, right? Because most of the time your heart is there, it's closed, and we're trying to like beat on, come on, go in information, but we have to like do something to open it so that, it's like, oh, okay. And then the information can see how it goes in now. I don't know what kind of, hand diagrams I'm doing, but it's working. So I would say do that. And then the second thing I would say do after that is be honest around the parents' function for their behavior. So earlier I was talking about, right, what is the teen's function for their behavior? I'm going to reverse it. As a parent, what's the function for your behavior? Are you nagging because you think your teen has poor memory skills? Are you nagging? Are you because you're afraid that they won't get into the type of school that you think is going to provide them opportunity? Are you so whatever it is, right? Are you strict because you think your teen is going to make a mistake you made that you felt altered the trajectory of your life? So having a parent actually stop and think about what is the function of their own behavior.
That's good.
And just really sit with it, right? Sit with it and see what comes up. Identifying what their parenting style is, because you want to think about your parenting style in conjunction with your teen's personality type. And there's like, I don't remember, it's like a few different personality types.
Right.
And then thinking about the other, so that's between mom, dad, however, your household is structured. You need to think about the two parenting types and how they even interact with each other. And I think that's something we don't talk about a lot. We don't talk a lot about how both parents interact with each other and how that impacts a child.
Right.
So take some time to think about what that looks like, because what I see a lot too is a teen may act like their dad. Mom isn't really into dad. So, now teen is getting the brunt of maybe some stuff mom would say to dad, or react to dad. And it's like, or say things like, you act just like your dad. And then that doesn't leave a good response with the child. So those would be my suggestion. Right. Definitely vice versa. Right. Or you go to grandmom's house and grandmom is speaking bad about mom. You know, it's just a lot of different things. So just even understanding those dynamics as a parent, like, okay, I know that this is a conflictual relationship, or I know dad responds this way to things, or I know dad is like this. You know, how can I work together? How can we work together? How can I make this work? Is it better for me to talk to dad about something away from the child, right? What's the way for me to go in? And I tell my parents all the time, sometimes you just have to pivot. I'm not saying that the message isn't important, but the method is not working.
Exactly.
So let's pivot.
Timing might not be the right time, or
or language. I mean, it could just be so many different things, but you know, those would be my suggestions. Yeah.
So we got, hey Tanya, I'm so glad you're here. Tanya says, hey Jaynay.
Hi.
Hey Kalina, glad you joined us. Hey Cassie. Mariama, I'm glad you're joining us all the way from Senegal, West Africa. Oh my
Hey Mariama.
So Illy says, what advice would you give to older generations with children/grandchildren who are young mothers? So they are helping them to learn to parent rather than to take over that parenting role. That, you know, we touched on this just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to reiterate, you know, how can we help grandparents not take over? I gotta take over spirit sometimes. So
yes, that's so funny. I have a dog, and my mom like literally like disregards everything I say in terms of like the treats, everything. I'm just like, you know what, forget it. I gave up with my about my dog. But some advice I would give to an older person who, you know, they're helping young mothers is just be mindful that they have to kind of learn the process just like you've learned the process. And so I think that that's what happens with older, you know, women and men. They're seasoned, and they have great things to offer, great advice, very comforting, lots of those things. But these young girls are trying to be like you, right, in a certain sense. And so giving them the advice, and more importantly, giving them like failure stories. And I know that sounds so odd, but young mothers and teens and young adults need to hear about our failures. They need to hear about the places where we weren't perfect, where we didn't know it, where we messed up. Because what it does, it allows them to be human. It allows them to truly invest in the process, because they know that they're going to mess up. You know, like for the most part, young people know. They know that they don't know a lot of things, but they put on the face that they know a lot of things, because a lot of people do not know how to navigate them being such a mistake-ridden, you know, bunch of people. So they act like they know everything because mistakes aren't received well from them. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Share some of those failed attempts at parenting, some of those failures, some of those failed relationships, some of those just whatever it is that you can think of. Share some of those pitfalls, because then you get to show them how you picked yourself up and how you got to a place of understanding versus I'm here, I've got it, I've been a good mom since I came out my mom's womb. And it's like, no, you haven't.
I was born like this.
I woke up like this, Beyonce, right? And it's like, no, you didn't. And that's okay. So giving them the real deal and the real timeline of what it was. And if you were a late bloomer to it, because there are some, you know, adult, you know, older women that took them a while to get it right. And that's, say that, like, you know, I didn't do as much as I wanted to do as a mom. And that's why I may overfunction as a grandmom. If that's your story, whatever your story is, just tell it, be real, and tell the whole story. I think a lot of the time, in an effort to not make teenagers or young adults make the wrong decision, we think if we tell them our horror stories, they're going to go do it. That's not true.
Exactly.
They're going to stay away from it, because if they value what you say and if they value your opinion and everything, they're going to be like, oh no, I'm not doing that then. You know, so that's my advice. That's my advice.
And I think I love that. I think another thing that older parents can do also, I like to use this as a metaphor. It's kind of like you are at a what is that? A bumper car course, and you know
Mm-hmm.
how it have the little the protective things on the
Yes.
outside, and you are the parent, guide,
Mm-hmm.
not there to take over, but just to set some boundaries and have some bumpers in place so that when that young parent makes mistakes, you're there
Mm-hmm.
to kind of help them get back on course,
Right.
jumping in and taking over, because when we jump in and take over, they don't learn the skills that they need to learn.
Right. So I had a therapist in my at my internship, because I can do that, right? I'm super like nurturing and with kids and everything. And I'm like, so I had a therapist tell me once there was a kid, I was shadowing her, and he was on top of like a trunk, jumping, doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, as a student, and I'm like, she's not gonna tell him to get down, he's gonna fall, he's gonna break something. I'm like, ooh. And she finally said to the mom, she was like, oh, do you see, Johnny? I'll use Johnny for example. Oh, do you see Johnny over there jumping on the trunk? And she's like, wow, he could really, wow, what do you typically do? Like, how do you navigate that? And it was such a profound moment, because I thought she was going to tell Johnny, like, oh, don't jump, you're going to hurt yourself. Instead, she directed mom to look at him and pay attention to what he was doing, and then kind of facilitate her to get him to stop and say, oh, is this sort of like the behavior you see at home? How would you handle that? Maybe you should tell Johnny, do you think it's a good time to tell Johnny to get down in case he falls or hurt himself? And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's like, oh my gosh, right? Because even in therapy and as therapists, you see the issue, we see the issue, which is why we're in the field, right? But we have to understand that it's good we see the issue, but we have to take a back seat and help someone else or the person in the room see the issue so that they can navigate it. And so it's kind of just the same thing with, teens and older adults, and just how to navigate that. It's like, you could know that this could not end up being the right call. You give them the advice, you share your story, and you say, okay, and you be open.
Right.
Another key. You need to be open when they come back to you, right? One thing adults do a lot that's so annoying, even to me, it's like, oh, you can come talk to me, I'm here for you. But as soon as they come talk to you, you're chastising, you're not accepting of the mistake that they made, and you make that experience, you tarnish it pretty much. So it's kind of like, you can't tell a teen, come talk to me, and then when they do, you're like, well, why would you do that? That was stupid. They're trying to figure it out. And yes, there are going to be some things that you tell them not to do and they do anyway. But if we told them why we're saying not to do it, and maybe we would also see that lesson.
That's so true, because I'm finding out that this generation need more explanation.
Lots of it. They need a whole dissertation.
I know, just saying don't do it because I said don't do it is really not enough. And they need more guidance, they need more explanation. And one thing I would add to what you're saying also is, I would add to, be okay with them not taking your advice.
Yes.
Because again, they're trying to figure it out on their own. So be okay that they might not take my advice. Let's see. Tanya says, unfortunately, parents don't always get it right. We make mistakes because there are no handbook with all the answers. We learn from our own upbringings and what we've seen and lived through. But the world changes with every generation, and parenting today is not the same as the last generation. So how do we show our kids we love them in today's language and still showing tough love when needed? That's a that's a good one.
It is a good one, and I'm ready. So the first thing I would say is identify what tough love is. I think we say tough love a lot, and everybody has a different definition of it. So what does tough love actually mean to you? Does that mean stripping them of everything? Like, what does it mean? Because even like you just said a second ago, Ann, tough love can't be used just because you gave your teenager advice and they decided not to follow it. And now it's like, now I got to be tough on them. It's like, no, like that was your opinion and you want them to have their own opinion. And this is something else I wanted to say about that is we sometimes don't realize that we're stripping our youth from the opportunity to critically exercise their own minds and thoughts and decision making by always trying to tell them what to do.
Right.
Because then they're going to go to college and then they're not going to know how to make a single decision. And then they're going to make a lot of poor decisions because the opportunity for them to have learned the trial and error of making a decision and critically think and have that supportive parent be there in home with them to guide them was missing, was gone, was taken, or used differently. Because you felt, oh, they just need to do what I tell them to do because I know best, right? So there's a reason why they need to go through this process and kind of make their own decisions and thoughts. And you want that because you want them to be able to critically think without you present.
Right. And I'm so guilty of that. I have a 26-year-old and a 28-year-old. And I mean, I wish I had gone to grad school before I had them. I mean, we did okay, but
I'm sure
there are a lot of things that I wish I'd done differently.
Yeah. So let me finish answering the question. So in terms of tough love, identifying what that is first, because I think it's important for the parent to know what tough love means and when are you turning it on, right? So when do you know it's time to turn on the tough love, which I think is another big thing because everything can't be a tough love moment. And I think that's when teens completely blank out and don't listen to anything because we're tough loving it every day, right? So I think that's one thing to pay attention to. What is tough love? What's the threshold that I'm turning it on? So that's the first thing. The second thing, by still showing them that you love them, is allowing them opportunity of expression. So whatever that means to your teenager, every teenager is different. Some teenagers want to spend more time with their friends. So obviously looking at how that impacts their world, if their homework is being done, their schoolwork, all of those things. But if so, allowing them to have more time with their friends. Some teenagers like to be by themselves more, right? And as long as things are okay, maybe not always, banging in the room or saying you can't close the door, I own the house, whatever it is, because every teen is different. Thinking about what motivates your teen, what they like, and allowing them to have some room there. And the other thing I find super successful is sitting your teen down and making them a part of the discipline and reward process. Because I think a lot of parents think one thing is going to work or motivate them and it doesn't. Right. So once you get their input, once you sit them down and you say, okay, I know you want this phone, this is what I need to see happen, but allowing the teen to negotiate with you so that they understand negotiating skills, you're getting an investment that you don't even realize you're getting, because if they're going to negotiate with you, they're going to stick to that plan more so. And there won't be any back and forth when they break the rule because you've had this conversation around this is how we're going to do it. And I think those are the ways to love them in their own language because they are looking for ways to feel more autonomous. They're looking for ways to make their own decisions and feel that their voice is important. So that would be a good way to love them in their own language. And the other thing is instead of always making comments maybe about different things happening in the world that we don't like the music or too much social media, asking them to tell you what they like about that. Like, you play this song a lot. What do you like about it? And let them be the expert in something and teach you about their world, because then they'll feel excited that you're interested in them versus, saying something negative about everything that they do or like.
That is so good. That is so good. And one resource that I want to share with parents or anybody who's watching, who's wondering what is, how do I express my teen's love language? There is an assessment that you take. It's 5 love language for teens. And I use that with all of my clients because that helps the parents to understand how the teens want to be related to, how they want love expressed to them, because it's not necessarily the same as we want love expressed to us. So those are
right.
very good things to know. Well, Miss Jaynay, this has been exciting.
Yes, I can talk about teenagers like all day long.
I'm with you. I am here for it. And I'm so glad for our guests who have joined us. Please, if you're still with us, share this out. This is really good information. Please share it to your audiences. And if you have any questions after the show, or you're catching us on the replay, remember to just drop them in here. Jaynay will circle back, and we will get your questions answered. And I'm just so excited. I'm really full right now. And tonight, for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about Daja's drama, and we're talking about generational cycles and how we can address those cycles in our own lives. So Shayna said we just did this with our children, and I was surprised. I mean, I get it. Love language, that's a really, really powerful tool. And it's good to know. Some of us don't want to know, but it's better to know.
Yes, absolutely.
Language is.
Because it's helpful. I think it'll also relieve the stress of parents feeling that they're not doing a good job, or that what they're saying isn't being received by their teen. But it's like, if that key doesn't work to the door, that key just doesn't work to the door. It doesn't make the door, less of a good door. It doesn't make the key less functional. It's just not a good, it's just not the key for the door. And I think that, understanding love languages and personality and temperament and all of that will help a parent not feel as if they're doing such a horrible job, because it's like, there's just different functions. The key, it just doesn't fit that door. And there's other keys to try.
That is such a great analogy. That key just doesn't fit that door.
Right.
Well, Jaynay, I'm just so grateful for your time. This has been so exciting. Can you tell our viewers where they can reach you, and where can they find you, and tell us about your book and your workbook?
Awesome. So hi guys. Although we've been talking. So this is my book. It's titled Dear Teen Self. And it's for girls. It's called Dear Teen Self, Tips to Help a Teenage Girl Navigate Adolescence. And here's the journal. And you can find me on Facebook, Jaynay C. Johnson. You guys can probably all friend me there. I'm on Instagram as well as Teen Talk Therapy, and that's where I post all of my resources for teenagers, different quotes, and I have lots of dialogue there. And you guys my website is www.teentherapytalk.com. And yeah, I'm available if you have any questions about teens. I have resources on the website for parents as well. Social media contracts. Social media is a big thing. And I created contracts for parents and clinicians alike to use with their clients to help them manage it better, because that's a big deal. Social media safety is really important. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if I'm missing anything, Anne. I always get this part wrong on podcasts.
Well, that's okay, because you know what? The great thing about this is you can circle back into the comments and drop your name, your contact.
Oh, yes.
And links to Amazon where people can get your book, because I think it's a really, really great tool
to
help, mitigate some of these issues so we don't have to deal with it, and empower parents along the way.
Absolutely. And help teens understand. I think so many teens have loved the book, and they were so excited that their parent got it for them, because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going through everything in this book. Like, this was such a great resource. And there aren't a lot of teen self-help books out there. So yeah, it's exciting.
Well, it has been my honor, my pleasure that you invested this time with Teen Talk Live tonight.
Yay.
Where we are transforming the lives and minds of teens and those who love them. I'm so delighted that you joined us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time, great conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us on Teen Talk Live, and stay tuned for next week's topic. I'm sure we're going to have something really, really interesting. Join us at 8:00 next week, and feel free to visit my website at www.annedillard.com, and I'll drop that in the comments section. Again, if you're joining us on the replay, share this out. This is good stuff. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a good night.
Good night.